Hey, I'm David Kullman, and this is The Path We Made. This podcast is about the stories behind the people and the real life challenges and struggles that shape who we are today. I'm going to be sharing my story because before we talk about where we're going, I want to tell you where I've been. Thanks for being here. Just a heads up, this episode includes discussion of addiction, loss, and suicide. Please take care while listening. I grew up in Arroyo Grande, California, and I love living on the Central Coast. It's my favorite place in the whole world. I've moved over to a couple different places throughout my life, and I always come back here. I had a great childhood, super loving parents. I can't say enough good things about my entire family. I have 4 brothers, and I went to a Christian school, a private Christian school, up until 5th grade. And I really enjoyed that. I had a lot of friends there. And then the school shut down going into 6th grade. And it was a pretty rough transition for me, not just socially, but academically. I was pretty far behind. And I kind of stayed far behind academically all the way through high school. I remember in high school, I would just show up to school without any of my homework done. And I would copy my homework from a couple of friends who would let me borrow theirs in the morning. And that's basically how I survived through all that. I was just pretty checked out academically. And I was really just focused on swimming and water polo and playing music in my youth group band. I played bass. And those were the things that I probably enjoyed the most, in high school, was being athletic and being musically inclined and just doing things like that. But school was always very difficult for me, but I found my own way to get through it. In high school, I started ditching school quite a bit, and I really wasn't on the college path. And my parents, put the pressure on me to figure out something with my life, because they were really concerned about me, rightfully so, as any parent would be, about how I was going to end up in life. And oddly enough, I was watching Hell's Kitchen with my family one night, and the intensity of it all, and just the kitchen, the heat, the fire, everything about it just really spoke to me. And from that moment, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a chef, and I wanted to cook. And lucky for me, the high school had just started up a culinary program where in my senior year, I had 4 periods of culinary arts, and I'm super grateful for that. It laid a great foundation for me with knife skills and cooking through a bunch of different recipes. We would work through the Le Cordon Bleu culinary school cookbook. So in my mind, I got an unofficial culinary degree. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. While I was still in high school, I was fortunate enough to be able to intern at a restaurant, a farm, and to do catering events as well, which I really gravitated towards the catering because you're always in a fresh location and some of the most beautiful properties that you've ever seen. And I really, really enjoyed that. It was a thrill for me. And by the time I had graduated high school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Every summer growing up, I went to family camp on Catalina Island, and it's a place where I have some of my favorite memories from my childhood. We got to play on the water, go hiking, go fishing, and just spend time with our loved ones. There was a chef who ran the camp kitchen on the island, and he elevated the camp food to what I consider restaurant quality food. And everything was served family style. It was about 300 plus people a day. And he offered me a job as soon as I had graduated high school, and I took him up on the offer. When I moved out to the island, they put me in a yurt with no electricity, no running water, and it was just me and my roommate. And when we first met each other, we were kind of skeptical because we knew nothing about each other until one night he was under his blankets in our yurt, and I saw some smoke coming out of the sides of his blankets, and he was hitting a vape. And I said, hey, you're not even going to offer me any? And from that moment on, we were instant best friends. And I was a cook and he was a dishwasher. And we just made tons of memories together and just had a blast out there, really, just cooking for people and working our tail off. Temporary staff and guests would come through, and so I got to meet a lot of new people. And one of my favorite parts was learning how to work out from different guests that would come through. There would be like Marines or wrestlers or weightlifters that would come to the island, and we had this wooden platform that had a bunch of rusty weights, and we called it the tetanus yard. And so me and my roommate would go out there and work out, and we just had a blast doing that. And in the kitchen, I quickly became one of the top performers, and the chef who was working there really poured into me and checked my strong ego as a young man. And he took me to a couple of food shows in LA and really gave me a glimpse into what a chef's life is really like. And I'm super grateful for him to this day. And back then, I didn't think he was this, wonderful high-end chef, but in retrospect, he was one of the most accomplished chefs that I had ever worked for. And I'm just so grateful that I had the opportunity to work under him. After a while of working on the island, I started to get island fever, and thinking I was the next Gordon Ramsay, I started researching chefs in my area that I might want to work under. And I reached out to one of them that was opening a restaurant in my hometown and asked him for a job. And he told me to come in and talk to him. So 2 weeks later, I packed my bags on the island and moved back to my hometown. I didn't have anywhere to live, so one of my really good friends, his dad had this little detached garage space, and it was just purely a garage. There was nothing there. And his dad was gracious enough and told us, well, if you build it out, and do the drywall and the paint and the carpet and everything, then you guys could live there. So 18 years old and full of energy, that's what we did. We'd stay up all night long and we'd work on that garage space. And before you knew it, we were done and we moved in there. And my brother moved in there as well with us because, hey, why not? What's another body in our little 400 square foot detached garage space? But we were happy as we could possibly be. We were having a ton of fun and working out together all the time. We were going to church and we found community there, which was great. And it gave me a moral compass that I really needed at the time. I went in to talk to the chef to have my interview, and the restaurant was still under construction at that point. And he asked me, well, how much do you want to get paid? And I said, thinking I was asking for the world, I said, $10 an hour. And before I could even finish my sentence, he was like, you're hired. And I ended up getting my brother and my roommate a position there as well. So it was a really cool deal because we're, by the time the restaurant had opened, we were all working together and living together and just having a blast doing that. Once I started working in that restaurant, I quickly realized I was way in over my head. One story that I'll never forget is I went into work and the prep crew, the morning prep crew hadn't finished my prep for the salad station that I was working. And it was like 30 minutes before, we opened for service, and I was rushing super hard. I needed to chop, wash, and spin some lettuce. So I went to go do all that, and the prep sink was full of defrosting squid. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? So I just put the salad spinner on the top of a prep table, put the washed lettuce in there and started spinning it all, and carry on with my day as normal, got all my stuff on the line and started working. And a couple minutes into service, the chef came out and he was obviously furious, but he was trying not to lose it in front of guests. And he pulled me to the back and he said, this is the kind of crap that I can't stand. And I looked down under the prep table that I was spinning the lettuce on, and thinking because I had put a trash can under the table, and I thought that the water would spin off into the trash can. Well, what had happened is the water trailed on the table down to the bottom of the prep table, where there was about 10 or 15 fresh baked loaves of bread that were going to be, served for the next day. And I had soaked every single one of them. And I was just like so embarrassed, so shocked. And I ended up finishing that whole shift, and I was just mortified that that had happened, and just was thinking I was going to lose my job. And at the end of that shift, the sous chef and the chef had a private conversation to figure out what they were going to do with me. And he came out and talked to me, and he said, "Hey, look, I want to fire you right now, but the sous chef thinks that you have potential and sees a lot of good in you. But I just want to let you know, like, if you're going to stay here, you're going to have to really step up your game." And he was saying, like, this is my life. This is my life's work. This is everything I've worked for. And I'm super serious about this. And I really took that to heart, and realized, like, yeah, I'm messing up everything this guy has worked for. That might not have been entirely true. I wasn't messing everything up, but that's the way I felt. And so my reaction to that was I showed up 2 hours early off the clock every single day after that to make sure my prep was done, and really tried to prove myself in that environment, and worked extremely hard, and learned as much as I could. I learned more working there than I think I learned, working at any other place, because the standards were high. Eventually, I moved on from the restaurant life. But before I left, the chef told me, "Your parents raised you right, and you're a hard worker and a nice guy." And I always held on to that, because it took a lot to recover from some of the mistakes I made. But what I learned from it all was that there is a standard, and in order to become great, you have to hold that standard. I got a job at Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant as a cook, and I was feeding the masses in an industrial setting. And honestly, I loved it. It was much more corporate. It was a 4-10 schedule, and I was off work by 1 o'clock. One of the things that I really enjoyed about working in that kitchen is I had a lot of creative freedom, especially there was a transition period where one company had the contract and they were switching to another company that was going to have the contract. And in between that period, I had complete creative freedom. We were doing 2 hotline meals that had 2 proteins, starch, vegetable. We had a full salad bar, the grill station where they do burgers and fries and things like that, and 2 soups of the day, pizzas, and catering jobs all the time that we would cook for different offices around the plant and deliver the meals. I got to learn how to cook food on a massive scale. A couple years into the job at the power plant, I took a hiatus where I volunteered at an orphanage in Belize, where I cooked for the kids and staff. For probably about 7 months I was there, and it was really amazing experience, eye-opening experience to see how other parts of the world live. I got to go to the markets on a weekly basis and go grocery shopping, which was really fun, like getting to know some of the local people, and got to plan out meals that I would cook, for the kids and staff. And it really changed my life. The kids really changed my life. They're so sweet and innocent, and they had been through so much. All of them had, such different stories, and it made me very, very appreciative of where I was born, to be quite honest, because a lot of them didn't choose to be put in the situation that they were in, and my heart would break for them almost every single day. but somehow through it all, they smiled and laughed and lived life to the fullest. And I'm just so grateful that I was, around them. And I like to think that I had an impact on some of them or was a father figure of some sorts to some of them. But to be quite honest, I think they had more of an impact on me than I ever did on them. And that's a period of my life that I'll never forget. And it changed me completely and really opened my eyes to how good we have it here in America. After a period of time, I moved back home to Rio Grande, California, and my parents were gracious enough to let me live in one of their spare bedrooms with my little brother. I got my job back at the power plant and was cooking there, and I started to feel the pressure of, becoming a man and trying to, build a retirement and build a future. So that was kind of where my mindset was then. And because of that, I started picking up more weekend work where I was catering and doing working at a couple different restaurants and just trying to fill in the gaps with my work schedule. And around this time, I was about 20, 21 years old, and I had to get surgery on my knee because of a torn meniscus. And while I was laid up in the recliner, I ended up messaging my now wife, Gabriella, on Instagram. I can't really remember what the message was, but we started talking, and I was so nervous to ask her out, but she eventually asked me out on a date. So we went to a local coffee shop, and we hung out, we drank our coffee. I couldn't tell if she was into me, but we started hanging out more and more, going on dates, and eventually we fell in love and got engaged 6 months later. January 4th, 2019 is a day that I'll never forget. It was just a normal day for me. I think I had just got off of work and I went to the gym and I got a phone call from my dad. And immediately when I picked up the phone, I could hear the panic in his voice. And he told me, "David, your little brother Michael is missing. I found his car parked at Montana de Oro. It has a parking ticket on it, and nobody's seen him for a couple of days. You need to get down here." So I immediately dropped everything and I got in my truck and I drove out to Montana de Oro and we started looking for him. And in the beginning, it was just me and my dad, some of my family members, and then eventually the search party started growing bigger and bigger. It was just like my brother's friends and people from the church that all joined in on the search party. And after a period of time, the sheriff had showed up with a search trailer and a whole search team. And as you can imagine, my brothers and my dad and my mom were all freaking out. And I remember in my kind of anxiety to figure out what was going on, I went back home because my brother had one of those tiles on his keys. So I was like, oh man, if I could go home and try to track him from the tile, maybe we could find him. And so I went to my parents' house to try to figure out the login information and stuff like that. And I ran into my mom and she was like, "David, tell me everything's going to be okay. Is he okay?" And I said, "Yes, Mom, everything's okay. He's okay. We're going to find him." And so I went back out to Montana de Oro, didn't have any luck with the tile device. And it started getting late, really late, and super cold. And I could just feel that something was very wrong. And in my mind at the time, I was thinking, man, I wonder if he went out surfing and got swept away by a strong current, or ran into some maniac who harmed him or something like that. And got later and later and darker, and everybody was searching. And it was around midnight the sheriff gathered my dad and my other brothers. Well, it was my dad, me, my oldest brother, and my one of my younger brothers. We were all in the trailer together, and the sheriff said that they found Mikey and he was deceased. And we just cried and screamed in disbelief, like we still didn't know what was going on. And just the sorrow and mourning that we felt was absolutely insane. And eventually, after there were no more, there was no reason to be at Montana de Oro, none of us were really in a state to drive home. So one of my parents' family friends gave me a ride home back to my parents' house. And there I saw my mother, who was crying over and screaming over her child. And it was a really intense scene. There's really no other way to put it. And we still didn't know what had happened to my brother. So we were there and we were waiting, and my dad had gotten a phone call from the sheriff to get some more details. And after he got off the phone, while, my parents were there, and it was just a bunch of family friends and my family, a lot of my extended family were there too, just comforting my mom. The sheriff told my dad that Mikey had died by suicide, and that just hit everybody like a ton of bricks. Like, never in a million years would I have thought that my brother would do that, or that would be a reality in my family's existence, like in his life. It was just shocking. And we cried until there were no more tears to cry for weeks on end. And I slept with, my brothers and my fiance in my parents' living room, because we all just wanted to be around each other and mourn together. And I just remember how, traumatic that was, and how intense that was for everybody. And, the questions that you have in your mind that will never get answered, like why, why did that happen, or what was going on? And still to this day, you can come up with all the theories that you want about, what might have led him to do that, but you never really know. And I think that's one of the difficult things about suicide, is like you don't fully know what led to that moment. And so there's a lot of speculation that can happen. And so I try to not go there, because it's kind of like just a rabbit hole that you could go down, and then it just leads you into a bad place. Yeah. A lot of the people in the community really stepped in to, take care of my parents and us during that time with meals, and I'm eternally grateful for that. We ended up having a celebration of life for him, and like the workaholic that I was, I returned back to work at the power plant 2 weeks later. The first day back to work after my brother had passed, one of my coworkers picked me up, and we carpooled into the plant. And I worked my whole shift and came home, and when he dropped me off at my apartment complex, there was police officers like surrounding the whole area. And I was kind of like wondering what's going on, this is like kind of hectic. And I was going over to my apartment, and when I looked across the way, my next door neighbor's door was open, and my neighbor had unalived themselves as well. And I just lost it. I couldn't believe it. I felt like I was being tormented, and I just felt like darkness in my life. And that's when I really started to experience like night terrors and stuff like that. I never, went to therapy for any meaningful amount of time. But as far as like PTSD goes, I've experienced pretty much every symptom of it. Gabriella and I were set to get married in 3 months after this crazy incident had happened, and both of us were pretty unsure about what was going to happen, but we had a conversation and we knew we were in love and wanted to get married, and we didn't want, that crazy, traumatic experience to affect, the rest of our life together. And one thing that I do remember from that was asking for a refund for my brother's suit, because we had like rented a suit for him. And that just always sticks with me, because it was another thing. I was just really sad that like he wasn't going to be at my wedding or see that part, in my life, and realizing that like I'll never get to see that, for him either. And that was really sad for me. On the wedding day itself, as we were getting married, this huge drove of monarch butterflies, flew through the ceremony area. And I just felt like it was a sign from God, like a sign of hope, for a better future, a sign that like there are better days ahead. And I always held on to that. And it really meant a lot to me in that moment. For our wedding gift, we asked our guests to consider donating to a honeymoon fund for Gabriella and I. And instead of me taking her on this elaborate honeymoon, I took that money and I bought a barbecue trailer, which, kind of ties in to my story at a certain point. But I had always like had this dream of being my own, boss, and owning my own catering company. And I was like, man, this is a perfect opportunity for me. I need to just do it. So I used a portion of that honeymoon fund and a portion of some money that I had saved up as well, and I went ahead and bought the barbecue trailer. And I took Gabriella to Catalina Island, where I had previously worked at that family camp, and we did our honeymoon out there, and they were gracious enough to let us go and spend a couple of days out there hiking and just exploring the island. So it was really fun. 6 months into our marriage, we found out my wife was pregnant, and it was just like, I was overwhelmed with joy. My kids are amazing, and they're the best part of my life, genuinely. And it felt good. It felt like there was like something to be happy about and excited about. But at the same time, I was still struggling with so much, trauma and grief that, I'd really turned to alcohol quite a bit to relieve some of that trauma for myself. And I ended up gaining about 50 pounds and being like pretty out of shape and overweight and not really healthy. And I was drinking a lot. I was drinking quite a bit, just to numb the pain, really, to take me out of my own head for a moment. As our life was expanding and our family was growing, I found it harder and harder to keep up with the bills, working the job that I was working at the time. And slowly over time, as I was working, I began to accumulate more and more catering equipment. So it had always been like a dream of mine to, start that one day. But at the time it was COVID and there really wasn't events going on. And at a certain point, I had lost hope, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should just, sell the barbecue trailer and all the catering equipment and like come back down to earth, and not pursue that dream. But lo and behold, there was a moment in time where the mask mandates had lifted for events, stuff like that. And there was just a flood and a drove of people wanting to get married during those uncertain times before the mandates would come back on. Like, people were just unsure of what was going to happen. So I remember I got think it was 3 weddings. I booked 3 weddings and I was still working full time. I was getting more and more inquiries for me to go and cater for people because the word had got out as I would go and cater for my friends and family and stuff like that. And the word got out that, man, his food's really good. He does a really good job. And, I started crunching the numbers and I'm like, wow, these 3 events is about the same that I make in 3 months working my 9 to 5 job. And so I eventually quit my job, and it was such a leap of faith because like here I was, newly married, we have a child, and I quit my job, the only real security we had, and like it's not like we had a bunch of money in the bank or anything like that. And I just continued to work my tail off and to try to make it happen for my family because I didn't really have the prospects of like getting a high paying job. So I didn't go to college, and that just really wasn't in the cards for me. So I took the leap of faith and started catering. I quickly came to the realization that I didn't have anything to lose by, at least attempting to start this business. And I know my wife was really longing for some change too in our lives. And she had mentioned this program called 75 Hard. And part of the program is you weren't allowed to drink alcohol at all. And I was all huffy and puffy about it because I didn't want to change what I was doing. But reluctantly, I did the program with her and I lost 50 pounds and it changed my life. 75 Hard is a mental toughness program, and that's really what I needed in my life at that moment was some mental fortitude, because starting this business, we were beginning a journey that requires so much mental strength, and a journey that I didn't really quite understand how difficult it was going to be, but also how rewarding it is going to be too. We ended up doing around 30 events that same year I had quit my job and only had 3 things on the books. And Kullman Catering has already exceeded my wildest expectations. And with, a relentless pursuit and dedication towards this, it not only sustains us financially, but it gives me a deeper sense of purpose and meaning in my life, and in trying to build something that is bigger than me. And we have an ever-growing team. We have about 10 employees, and we're growing year over year. New menu items, bigger clientele, and it's really only just the beginning for us. I slowly began to fall in love with cooking again. And don't get me wrong, it's still a grind, and I still work extremely hard. But that's the funny thing about life, is it's going to be hard either way, but you get to choose the path that you're going to take. My daughter was born this year, January 4th, 2025, the same day that 6 years ago my brother had taken his own life. And I've thought about what this means, and I don't really know what it means, but I do believe that it's a sign from God, a sign for hope for me and my family, and for something greater than myself. It's the struggles that we face that make us who we are, and there's no testimony without a test. And if you're going through it right now, I just really want to encourage you to keep pushing forward and to never give up, because you know what? Life is beautiful. I know this is a heavy story, but I hope it encourages you that despite your circumstances, you can overcome. I want to thank you for listening to The Path We Made and to listening to my story, and I hope you tune in again as we interview other people and their stories and the lessons that we can learn from it.